Hey, this is Ron. Since I haven't recorded a podcast in so long, I thought what I might do is go back and rerun one of my older podcasts, which gave some of the history of my running. So I'm going to play you LostTrailRunner II, episode number 2, which is called History. And I believe I originally recorded it in probably 2011 sometime. So I hope you enjoy it. This is a Lost Trail Runner 2 podcast, and this is episode 2. Since this is the second episode of my new podcast, I thought maybe I'd go into some of my history and let you know who I am if you're a new subscriber, and even if you're an old subscriber that's switched over from my Lost Trail Runner podcast, you may or may not know a whole lot about me. Just listen to my droning voice that will put you to sleep. I've been running for probably close to 40 years now. So you can see by that alone that I'm probably older than most of you. Not all of you, but most of you. And I have gone through different lives in running, if you want to call that. I don't know. I started out in Orlando, Florida, back in 1972, and I was kind of on and off again running. I was trying to get into it, but I wasn't real consistent. If you'll notice that year, 72, was when Frank Shorter won the gold medal in the marathon. And Lassie Viren, I think, won maybe the 5K, 10K, I don't know. And I think he came in third in the marathon. I'm not sure. But anyway, all that stuff inspired me. I had been inspired previously, but that got me all wound up again, wanting to run. And I started, and then I stopped. I had fits and starts. I bought a couple of books. I bought Jogging by Bill Bowerman, and I bought Aerobics by Kenneth Cooper. And I started counting aerobic points and using Cooper's plan basically to get moving, which at the time his first book was run 1 mile 5 days a week to start out, and it had a time goal to reach at the end of each week, and if you didn't reach that time goal, then you repeated that week. And that was a good basic program for me to start. I didn't have any aspirations of running races. I don't think there were that many races around back then. And so I kind of off and on did that. But in 1974, I don't know what happened, but I really started getting into it. I think what happened is there was a group of people I worked with that we played tennis a lot, and they started getting into running. And we started running together and training, and eventually, I think it was about 1975, I ran my first 10K race in Lakeland, Florida, and I was really proud of running that race. I ran I still remember the time. It was a 45:21. And when I ran that race, that was my first race, and I decided this will be the slowest I ever run a 10K. I'll get faster, but I'll never get slower than a 45:21. Well, that was true until I turned about 65, maybe, something like that. As you can see, I'm old, and my time started slowing down. But even though my time slowed down, I enjoy running so much that it doesn't matter anymore how fast or slow I run. I just do it. Got some police here in the road. I wonder what this is about. I'll turn off my recorder until I get through this roadblock, okay? Well, I don't know what that roadblock was for, but got through it. Maybe they're putting up power poles because I see a bunch of trucks down here. Anyway, that screwed up my train of thought. Where was I? Slowing down, right? I was slowing down because I'm getting older. And I still enjoy running, and I still enjoy running in races, even though I run slower. But that's what age group racing's all about, right? Everybody slows down, everybody changes age groups. So, I still have a good time when I go to races, and you just can't look at your old PRs and expect that sort of result when you get older. So, to put it in perspective, my fastest 10K ended up being a 39:01, and last year I ran Peachtree in a 58:30. Okay, so that's it. And I'm training again for Peachtree right now, which will be my, I don't know if it's my 35th or 36th. I lose track. Anyway, so what it boils down to is I'm an old codger now, but I still enjoy running, and I really hope that you'll listen to my podcast and enjoy listening to it. Even though I have a monotone voice that'll put you to sleep, I occasionally have my daughter Laura on with me, and as you can see, I just played a recording. She left me this last week, so having her on with me every once in a while helps the podcast some. And we'll be talking about training. We'll be talking about just what we're doing when we're running. There is no real format to the podcast like some of the really organized and professional type podcasts. I'm not in that category, and I never have pretended to be. I've gone through spells of trying to get organized, like reading excerpts from George Sheehan's books and doing some training things and all that. And I basically use Jeff Galloway's philosophy on training and running now. When I was younger, of course, I had no clue about his training philosophy, and I did a lot of serious training using Roy Benson's method, his effort-based training. And I do Galloway now, mainly because the races that I do, I've been kind of heading towards half marathons more and more. And with a half marathon, you can run, walk, and still have what you would consider a really good experience in a half marathon. So that's what I've been doing. I moved to Atlanta in January of 1978. But previous to moving to Atlanta, I ran a couple of, in my way of thinking, to me, there were significant races. I ran a 10-mile race down in Orlando at the University of Central Florida, which at the time was Florida Technological University. The name got changed, I think, in 1978, maybe, 79, 80, in that period of time, after I'd graduated anyway. And I ran a 10-miler there, came in third my age group, ran 73 minutes, and was really impressed with myself because some of the guys I had worked with that I ran with during our training days, when I would run with them, I was always huffing and puffing trying to keep up with them. I was like a 9-minute training guy. I'd run 9-minute pace, and they'd be running 8:30, and I just, I could keep up with them if I wanted to, but I just was comfortable at 9. But when we ran that 10-mile race, I ran it in 73 minutes, and the one individual I remember running with a lot ran it in 80 minutes, and he could not figure out how I could run so much faster when in training I didn't run that fast. And I think at the time I just told him, well, I run how I feel in training, and in a race, I race. And I think what he did is he ran at what he had considered his fastest pace all the time, and in a race, he just didn't have another gear. He just ran the same pace. So, does that make any sense? You'll hear me say that quite a lot when I'm talking to you. But anyway, I did that race, and I felt that was significant. Then later on, or maybe before, because that was a long time ago, I did what was then called the Tangerine Bowl Half Marathon. It was my first half marathon, and I ran it in 1:41. And that race, I think, was the first half marathon in Orlando, and George Sheehan came to that race, and I met him at a Orlando Runners Club party at the president's house. I think it was the night before the race, or maybe 2 nights before the race. But anyway, he was a very quiet person, but interesting. And that race was significant to me also. And then, of course, when I moved to Atlanta in 78, all you ever heard up here was Peachtree Road Race. That was like it, running Peachtree. So I ran my first Peachtree in 1978, and I, to tell you the truth, have no clue what my time was. I know at that period of time, my 10K races were in the 44-minute range. They were faster than 45, but they were not faster than 43. They were like maybe a high 43, mid 44 for a 10K. So that may have been what I ran. And I ran every race since 1978 but one race. The 20th anniversary, I think it was the 20th anniversary race, closed out in 8 days. And it was the first one to ever do that. It could have been the 25th anniversary. But anyway, whichever one it was, it closed out in 8 days. And it had never done that before. And I had sent my race application in like the 9th day. So I got a letter back saying, too bad, race is closed out. So I didn't get to run that race. But every race before that race and since that race I've run since 1978. And I think my best Peachtree is about a 41. I never did train for Peachtree being a summer race. This year, which may be my 36th Peachtree, will be the first time that I've ever trained specifically for Peachtree out of all those years. Previously, I just ran. I'd go to running camp in the summer sometime in June and come back, and maybe you could consider that training for Peachtree, but it really wasn't. And so this year is going to be my first Peachtree, and that I trained for specifically. And oh, by the way, I've registered for the Atlanta 13.1 half marathon in October. I sent in my registration last week because the price goes up, I think, day after tomorrow. It goes from $60 to $75 to enter, so I figured I better get my entry in, save myself $15. So after Peachtree's over, then I'll have another race to train for. And I have found that if I do have a race to train for, I have a set training schedule, that I am so much happier running. I feel like I've got a goal to shoot for, whether it's, whether I'm just having that training plan and having a particular type workout that I need to be doing inspires me to run. Like yesterday was my Magic Mile run for the second week of this training cycle, and it was just, when I went to run, it was like I had a goal, and this is what I needed to do, and I did it, and I felt so much better doing it that way than just going out and slogging around for 45 minutes. So I have to have a race that I'm shooting for. I mean, a goal race. There are plenty of races that I run that are just like a couple of weeks ago when I ran that trail race. That wasn't a goal race. That wasn't a race I was aiming for. It's just a race that came up and I signed up for it. So anyway, I better quit recording here for a little bit because I'm sitting in the parking lot at my chiropractor. I've got an appointment at 11:45 and it's 11:43, so I got to be heading in the door. So I'll get back to you in a little while and record some more, okay? See ya, bye. I'm back again. I just got out of my chiropractor visit. He worked on my back and my lower left hip area again. I think I'm getting better. I know I can run without pain. I mean, there was a time when I suffered when I was running, but I'm doing fine now. So I got an appointment in another 2 weeks. Okay, where were we before I cut the mic off to go to my appointment? Running Peachtree, that sort of thing. I'm really not sure where. I know that when I moved to Atlanta and I got into running up here, I tried to get involved in different things. There was a group called the Northeast Striders that lived in Tucker, Georgia at the time, up near North Lake Mall, if any of you are in this area or familiar with the Atlanta area, that met out of, there was a Fidipides II in a little shopping center behind North Lake Mall. I think the person that ran it was Chris Shopley, might have been his name. I think he became the ASICS rep after that. But anyway, had a club called Northeast Striders, and one of the persons that was in that club, or at least ran in the races, if he wasn't in the club, was Benji Durden. You might have heard of him. He was a very good runner from the Atlanta area at the time. He'd run at the University of Georgia, and he qualified for the Olympic Marathon in 1980, which got boycotted by the U.S. because Jimmy Carter didn't want us to be going to Moscow, I guess. So Benji got cut out of doing that. And I've mentioned him in previous podcasts, running on the trail out at Stone Mountain. And then Jeff Galloway had an Atlanta Running Center, was the name of an organization that he, I think, ran out of Fidipides down at Ainsley Mall. And the original purpose of the Atlanta Running Center, I think, was to build a running community. When I say a community, I mean like where people live, that has trails and all that sort of stuff. And I don't know whatever happened to that idea. It kind of disappeared, I guess. But during that period of time, Arthur Lydiard came to Atlanta, and there was a reception for him at Fidipides and Ainsley Mall, and I was invited, being a member of the Atlanta Running Center. So I did get to meet Arthur Lydiard, which was quite an honor. And he signed a book for me. That's some of my background. That's basically where I started out with this podcast, right, was some of my background. And I spent many summers at Roy Benson's running camps. The first ones I went to were up in Brevard, North Carolina at Brevard College, and they were called Florida distance running camps because Roy was, at that time, I think, out of Gainesville, Florida. And then later on, he moved his running camps to Asheville, to University of North Carolina, Asheville campus, and it was just called the Smoky Mountains Running Camp. But I went to quite a few of those running camps, and I really did enjoy them. I think after I got injured one year, I quit going, and I just never went back. I don't know why, but I'd really like to go to a running camp again, just the week of being immersed in the whole thing, going to little classes or seminars every day, running a couple of times a day with a group. And the groups are always set up where you're kind of running in your own pace group, or they do out and back runs. And they'll say run out for a half hour and then turn around. That way, regardless of your pace, everybody ends up at the finish at the same time. And of course, all those runs were on trails, and that's where I got into trail running. And, of course, the name of my podcast is LostTrailRunner II right now, and my handle is LostTrailRunner. And it's because of running on those trails and liking to run around Stone Mountain on the trails and everything that I came up with that name. It doesn't mean basically that I'm a hardcore trail runner. I'm not a ultra runner or any of that. I do run in like Xterra trail races, and I do run in the Dirty Spokes around here, Dirty Spokes trail races. But as far as the big ultras or any of those, I have never run one of those, and I just really have never had a desire to run one of those for some reason. But I do love running trails, but I'm not exclusively a trail runner. I run on the pavement quite a lot, and I always have. So if you are looking for a podcast that's strictly about trail running, my podcast isn't the one. I'm basically an unstructured podcast about anything that comes to my mind. And quite frequently, I'll be running on the trail out at Stone Mountain while I'm podcasting. I might be in my car podcasting. I might be talking to my daughter podcasting. Sometimes I'll try to get one of my friends. That's something that I could do more of, is maybe interview some of the people that I do know and run with, and get them on my podcast for their insight into what we're doing. So that's a little bit about me. I would really love it if you guys would call in either on Skype. My handle on Skype is LostTrailRunner, and I do have a recorder on there. So if you do call in on Skype, you can leave a voicemail message, just like you can on a regular telephone. And you can send me emails on my email, which is losttrailrunner@gmail.com. And I'm on Twitter. You can post messages on Twitter to me about my podcast if you want. And of course, I'm Lost Trail Runner on podcast. On Twitter, I'm Lost Trail Runner. And of course, I do have a blog, LostTrailRunner at blogspot.com. I have another podcast called Ron's Update / Lost Trail Runner, which is just a short, usually less than 10-minute long podcast that's just kind of a whatever I'm in the mood to say. Basically, I usually just covers some of what I've done for the week type thing. And most of those podcasts are on my Lost Trail Runner blog. I put them in iPadio, and they go automatically to my blog and to Posterous, and I have a WordPress blog that they go to also called Lost Trail Runner. So, or you can subscribe. If you go to losttrailrunner.blogspot.com, on the right-hand side, there are buttons where you can subscribe to either one of my podcasts, the Lost Trail Runner II or Ron's Update. Plus, I have players there where you can just click on them and listen to either podcast. But I would love to have some feedback. And if you do subscribe to the LostTrailRunner II in iTunes, if you would go ahead and give it a rating on iTunes, I'd really appreciate it, because I have no ratings whatsoever for LostTrailRunner II since it's a new podcast. This is just the second episode. As you can, if you go to LostTrailRunner II, you'll see that there are episodes prior to number 1 and number 2. Those are from my original podcast, Lost Trail Runner, and I just brought some of those over to my Podbean account and put them in there. So if you want to listen to some of the older ones, you can. And if you're interested in listening to some of my first podcasts, which are even worse than this one, you can go on my website, www.LostTrailRunner.com, to my archive, and you can listen to any of my old podcasts there. Some of them are pretty pitiful. Even worse than this one. You may wonder how anything can be worse than this one, right? But no, some of them are worse than this one. But if you like this podcast, which I hope you do, please continue listening and subscribe to it however you want to. On FeedBurner, on Podbean, I guess, or iTunes, anywhere else you want to subscribe. So, I guess that's it for now. I'm sitting in my car out here outside the chiropractor's office talking to you, and I need to get moving. So I'll cut it for now, and I think today's going to be a bike trainer workout. I may get outside and do some running. We'll see. Anyway, I'll talk to you later. Goodbye. As you can tell in that version of my podcast there, a lot of the stuff that I mentioned is obsolete. Like, I don't use Skype anymore, and I don't use Blogspot anymore, but I do use WordPress, and I also do have my Lost Trail Runner website, LostTrailRunner.com. I also, in this particular episode, moved my daughter's recording to the end of the podcast, so that'll be coming up next. She called in and left a message, and I'll put that on next, and then that'll be the end, so I'll see you later. To open episode 2, I'm going to play a call-in from my daughter Laura. I haven't been training much with her lately, so she called in to give me an update on what she's been doing. So here she is.
Okay, here's my first attempt at leaving a message on my training routine. Actually, since running the Disney half marathon, I have been changing up my routine a little bit, which I need to start incorporating a little bit more running. Since training for the Disney half, we were getting up there in mileage, and I was only doing boot camp 2 days a week. And now I have actually, I'm trying to run 3 days a week, do boot camp 2 days a week, and I do a spin class 1 day a week. Now that I'm not going to Dave Ramsey anymore on Wednesdays, my plan is to do a 5-mile run on Wednesdays, a 2 or 3 mile run on Fridays, and then another 5-mile or more run on Saturday or Sunday, and then continue my boot camp. And I really enjoy the spin class, so I'm hoping that gives me some extra endurance to help my running. I'm not a big cyclist. I don't like running riding my bike out, there's too much traffic and people are just not nice to cyclists unless you're way out in the country and you don't have to deal with a lot of traffic. But where I am, it's just not feasible. So I really enjoy doing the cycling. And what she's started us doing is there are several of the ladies that are training for a triathlon and their first triathlon. So what she started doing is incorporating a run to help the ones that are training transition from the bike to a run. So I've been doing a little bit of that. Well, actually, since she started doing it, I've been doing it every time. But it is a big transition to go from a bike to a run. The first quarter to half mile, your legs feel absolutely like Jell-O. So today I actually ran with a lady who was dreading the run, and I'm one of the slowest ones, and I felt like I was a runner, and all these ladies are take off and go. But today there was a lady there that is not a big runner, and so we ran part of the way together, and then I took off from her. But I just think just doing that and doing the transition will help me in my running. So my plan is my next race that I'm training for is Peachtree, so I need to get on another schedule with the 3 days of running, which is what Galloway usually has, is at least 3 days of running. And then with the other things that I'm doing, hopefully it'll make me a stronger runner. Let's see what else. And I've done 2 different types of spin classes. One is, I don't know what you would call it, but it's about 45 minutes, and you actually do like you're racing. So you do a lot of, like you're going uphill, so you really put the resistance on, and you really push it, and you go faster like you're racing somebody, and, it's about a 45-minute, and that's the one with the run. And then last week I did one that they actually call an endurance, and it's an hour, and you don't ever get out of the saddle. You stay in the saddle for the whole 45 minutes, and you kind of judge your, I guess it's called cadence is what they call it, how many times your leg goes around. And you keep your heart rate at a fat-burning rate the whole time. So you're at a heart rate where you can talk, but you're in that fat-burning zone. And I enjoyed that because it was, it was not super hard, because like on Fridays, you're pushing it and it almost kills you. But this one was more relaxed, but you're still staying in that zone where you can talk to somebody. So, and I hope you can make something out of everything that I just rambled on. So anyway, I'll just talk to you later. Bye.
Well, that's the end of the podcast for today, and hopefully in the future I can be more consistent and maybe put out some new content. This podcast can now be listened to on Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, iTunes, Spreaker, and I might be forgetting a few others. But anyway, you can subscribe on any of those particular places to listen to this podcast, and hopefully you will. So until next time, have a good time running, and as I always say, just keep moving. Bye.
Hey, thanks for listening to today's podcast. We'll be here next time. Keep the emails coming in and be sure to subscribe.